Previously on Tales from Tech Titans. What motivated you to go into computing in the 90s?
So I think, this is a good story to start with. What motivated me to go into tech in the 90s? So I was always just thinking, what's the next opportunity or the opportunity after that? I was only ever thinking 2 jobs away.
I did smile when I saw that you came back to Woolworths. I thought you were just obsessed with bloody supermarkets.
In that time, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and crying because I didn't get that job.
In 2019, your career kind of exploded in a multitude of different directions. In fact, career is not probably the right word for it, but let's say the working aspect of your life exploded. And I saw there was a role as an advisory board with One Roof Women.
Yep.
What was that all about?
So Cherie Rubenstein, she runs that organisation. Do you know what? I'd actually, and it's not on my LinkedIn profile. I'd actually started a couple of startups myself. So I'd figured, you know what, I work in tech. Why don't I have a go? So I started a marketplace called Beauty Finder, and it was for get your hair and makeup done at home, right? So kind of coordinating that. Being a working mum, time poor, wanting to have services. My husband and I developed it. He's been in marketing, business development, sales background, now more user experience, etc., customer experience. So we developed that business on the side. So had that great opportunity to realise how hard that is, and then through that I met actually Cherie, and then because of my background in tech, etc., I was sat on her advisory board for a period of time with a couple of other big players actually at the time. So some people so Cherie has got a fantastic network, and she was about to, so she had a space on City Road that was like a place for women to come together, entrepreneurial startup type situation. She had a lot of speakers. She was then going to be creating, she had also like a working space there as well. And then 2020, she was just about to sign a lease on a big building in Richmond, sort of overlooking the Yarra, to create a working space. And COVID hit at that time, right? So she completely pivoted that business. So I was sort of working with her on the side for a period of time. So yeah. Yeah,
great. And around that time, sort of early 2020, as that was going on, you launched Lady Leadership.
Yeah.
And I was sort of reading up on this, and I read, if I understood this correct, your mission to help 100,000 women grow their careers in tech.
Yes.
So what kind of inspired? I probably know the answer, but I'd just love to hear your answer. But yeah, what inspired that?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to give back, right? So, you know, as I mentioned, I had those 4 or 5 really pivotal women in my career who were able to sort of tell me the lay of the land before I got there, or help me out when I was, you know, second guessing myself, or like, you know, there's probably a lot of war stories in that, 20-year career that we covered, in terms of not being listened to, in terms of not being heard, in terms of being overspoken in meetings, we still only got 30% representation of women in tech. Well, it hasn't got any better in the last decade. It was only till I was actually at Woolworths I realised how few women there were in technology. I'd sort of not noticed prior to that, right? I'd had all these interesting and exciting jobs and opportunities. But, there would always, there were certainly moments in my career, when I was living in India, I went to an event and it was only me and the waiting staff that were female, of an event of quite a few hundred people, right? So there've very much been many instances where I was the only woman in the room. And then also there've been many instances, particularly when I was at some of the organisations I mentioned, I'm out at warehouses, etc. And, I would be stood there as the most senior person, come to visit that, to look at the technology, and the conversation would be very much directed towards my male, who were my key reports, right? And so they would direct the conversation at them until they realised that I was actually the boss, right? So it was very, very interesting to kind of watch all of that, right? So I think all of those years kind of culminated in me I started the podcast, and I started 2020. It was probably right before COVID, and then it was kind of something for me to do over COVID as well. And then it ended up, so I think I've recorded over 100 episodes of Lady Leadership, and it kind of ended up as a bit of an exercise for myself in terms of kind of a psychology, and you would understand what I'm saying here is what you learn through interviewing so many people, yes. Right? Yeah. So like I think I probably interviewed about 80, maybe 90, and then I've got episodes where I've just talked on those. It's like the learning that you actually get yourself through that. So my original intention was to be able to give back and to help women in their careers and interview people and understand about their careers. And in actual fact, I ended up kind of evolving myself, right? And then I thought, well, where else can I take this? So I developed a course. One of the key things that I understood through that period of time was very much this confidence piece. So I created a course, an online course called The Confidence Project, which is about understanding what your mission, your vision, your purpose and your priorities are. Really kind of how do you have the courage to step forward, to put yourself in situations, to speak up in meetings. I've always been a big believer in no one knows what you want to do unless you actually tell them. The person who I started out on as in Target or on the help desk is not the person that you see today, right? I was super shy. I was super reserved. I was super. My mum and dad, and my mum's passed, but my mum and dad, were like, gosh, we can't believe the career. But it's just been this very step by step, right? So it's not, and, developing that as I got more comfortable and more. So I wanted to, try and package that up and give that to people. And then I do executive coaching for women because, in these roles, right, like, I've been, I've had whistleblower, complaints. I've had, bullying complaints. I've had, all these challenging situations. I've had, a lot of that sort of stuff as well. So I think it's women understanding that that's with these big roles becomes these big issues as well, and things that you have to deal with. And so, how do you have your own boundaries? How do you know? How do you have space for yourself? And particularly as a mother as well, working out how do you manage work, home life, family life, all of that kind of stuff as well.
Juggle many, many things.
That's right. My husband and I regularly laugh about the fact that, we've forgotten to go to parent-teacher interviews once again.
Yeah, it's easy to.
That's right, not just one time,
At the heart, I guess, of effective coaching is about powerful questions and asking the right questions. So when you're kind of going into those sessions, what kind of questions are you asking people to challenge their thinking about their careers?
One is, what's your vision? A lot of people don't have a vision. So, and the vision doesn't have to be for 5 years. It could be for the next 6 months. Yeah. Or another one that I like to understand is why are you in this role now? Like, what are you wanting to learn? Why, and how would you rate yourself on those skills? And then where do you want to go? And then how do you create a bridge? So how do you build a bridge from where you are now to where you want to go? And then I think super important is blockers, right? So a lot of people say no to themselves before someone's ever said no to them. So they'll be like, oh no, I'm not going to go for that because I don't. Well, how about you go for it and then see what the feedback is? Or how about you tell someone what you're looking to do, because you'll find out very quickly whether they see the same. So if you've got aspirations for doing something and they're not on board with that and they don't see you that way, and this makes me laugh because I got told I would never be a project manager when I was that business analyst back in one of those businesses, right? And some woman who was pretty senior at the time had come and told me, like, you're not going to make a very good project manager. Okay, I don't see you doing this. Okay, well, I've ticked that box, right? But that was just her opinion. That's just one person's opinion. Go and find out some other people's opinion. Yeah. And find, I think, sorry, I've gone on a bit of a ramble.
No, that's right.
What was the original question? It's like, what curious questions?
What powerful questions did you encourage people to ask to reflect?
I think So I think with coaching, right? So I mentioned to you before I horse ride, and I've got to mention horse riding during this podcast, right? Because it's a big part of my life. I have a coach for horse riding. I have a couple of different coaches for horse riding. But then I think you've got to know as well when you need to walk away from a coach and be by yourself and do things on your own as well. So coaches can encourage you and ask you good questions and give you advice and all that kind of good stuff. Then there's a good opportunity to go and do things by yourself and also, try things as well.
Sometimes the coach can be the momentum to get you started.
Correct. Yeah.
But ultimately, you've got to take the journey yourself.
Correct.
Perfect. So that would be the way I kind of tend to look at that. I'm interested, you said you encourage people to think about their vision.
Yeah.
What percentage, I'm not going to hold you to an exact number of this, but what percentage of people can articulate that?
Most have to think about it.
Mm.
Yeah. Most can't tell me on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some can. Some are like, this is what I want. How can you help me get there? Right? And that's great. Some are like, oh, I need to think about that. And part of the coaching is actually articulating that. Helping them articulate. So then going through what's important, what's not important, or where do you see yourself, or what have you done that you don't want to do anymore, or why don't you, and then people come up, that's where people come up with blockers for themselves. That's where people come up with the excuses and I didn't do that because, or whatever, Yeah.
I saw a kind of related metaphor to this once, and it was a kind of cartoon, and it was the coach kind of pulling up in a car next to a hitchhiker and saying, where are you going? And the hitchhiker, in theory, has got a pretty good idea of the direction they're going, but if the coach can't help them, they're the wrong car to get into as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So It's also about, I think, articulating that vision is making sure you're hitching yourself to the right person that can enable it.
Yeah. And look, I tend to work with people sort of for so I've got a couple of clients actually I've probably been working with for about a year, but I tends to be a bit short and sharp, and I'm going to hold you accountable, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not going to, I'm very very clear with people, if you're not going to do the work, then I'm probably not the right person for you.
Yeah.
So
But I think that accountability is key.
Yeah.
I'm a big, I love the book Atomic Habits, James Clear.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think that book does very successfully is it talks about how to break those habits down into something really easy.
Yeah.
So you can keep yourself accountable. When it's big and enormous, this new habit you're trying to create, you're probably going to fail.
Yeah.
Maybe less so if you've got a cheerleader or someone pushing you along, but if you make it simple and easy, the chances of success are going to improve. And I think sometimes the job of a coach is to help a person get the perspective on the size of the thing they're trying to do or the habit that they're trying to put in place.
Absolutely.
To help them realize, hang on, is this too big? Or is this manageable?
Yeah.
And celebrate the success with that person as well.
And look, a lot of people come to me because something's happened, an event's happened, right? Maybe they've lost their job, or they've gone for a promotion, they didn't get the promotion, that type of thing. There's sort of something, there's generally some impetus, or they what I find with women is, and this is general, this is not everyone, so but a lot of women work in their career and are very busy in their career and doing all the right things and all the rest of it. They're not necessarily working on their career, so they're not doing the networking, they're not getting out and doing all of that sort of stuff. And look, that's hard when you're a primary carer as well. And so and that goes back to that vision and where, how long do you want to be in this job, and then what are those next steps that you want to take, and what is that, some planning. And then, so that's one thing, and then boundaries as well, right? So a lot of women, will be working too many long hours, saying yes. They'll also be doing other people's work, kind of catching. I had a lady that I worked with many years ago who told me to stop catching people, right? Let people stand on their own 2 feet, that type of thing. And so I think innately, because we are, a lot of us are primary carers, and that we're caring for parents, we're caring for children, we're caring for the family, we want to try and be helpful, and we want to, pick up everyone else's, but we've sort of got to stop some of that. So it's having a bit of a realization about that type of stuff as well. So, yeah.
I read a quote from you. You said, when you become visible, you become valued.
Yes, nice.
That's one of your quotes. So what did you mean?
Well, people can see what you're doing, right? So this was about, you can be really busy doing a whole lot of work, but if it's not visible to anyone, then they can't see the value in it. And so that's about promoting yourself. That's about, yeah,
okay.
That's you have to tell people.
You kind of threw my Britishness in my face earlier, so I'm going to reverse that with the Australian. It's an Australianism, I think, is not to not actually talk about some of your achievements or successes. I find Australians, that's not a natural behaviour.
No, and even at the start of this, when you were talking about what I'd done, I was like, that sounds really impressive.
That's right. Was that me?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So did I do that?
You talked about confidence as well earlier. And you kind of associate, I guess, confidence with imposter syndrome, or generally, it's kind of the two are put together. So how do you kind of advise your clients that you work with around imposter syndrome and kind of the balance between, what's healthy and what's unhealthy? Yeah,
look, I think... so there's a couple of good people that I've actually interviewed on my podcast who talk about this. One's Penny Lacasso, and she talks about micro steps of bravery. And so, if you're wanting to do something, how do you break it down into achievable tasks and things? So really kind of how do you push yourself? I relate it to horses, right? And that, you might want to ride in the Olympics. We've just had the Olympics, which I've never wanted to do, by the way. But you might start by just going to the horse paddock and catching the horse and brushing it, right? So that's your first, and then once you've brushed it, you think, oh, I might put the saddle on it. Once you've saddled it, you think, oh, I might put my foot in the stirrup. Next thing you're on the horse, right? You do that for 300 days. Probably might need to do it for a few more and get out to a few events and actually start competing at a very high level. But you might find yourself at the Olympics. Next thing you know. So it's like just building those things, building that. Consistent behaviour.
Sort of tiptoeing towards the destination, so to speak.
Yeah. And then when and I can. So in May this year, I rode my horse 122 kilometres, right, from over 6 days. From Tullarook, which is near Seymour, to Mansfield. And some of those days we rode 30 Ks. Now, this was a horse that I fell off 4 years ago, broke 4 ribs, punctured my lung. To then take my horse on this ride was what I just talked about, and doing those things to rebuild that confidence and to rebuild that trust between me and the horse. And even so, I've had my horse, I think, 6 years. I've fallen off her twice. One was that big accident I just talked about. I fell off her 6 weeks before I was about to go. And then I think 4 weeks before I was about to go on this long ride, my float broke down, right? So, and when I mean broke down, like you can't put animals in this float anymore. Like there's a hole in the steelwork underneath it, right? And so you're going to get on the way to these destinations. You're going to get those big things. Now, it was funny. So this is where you need to find the people around you who are going to support you when you come up against those big things, and particularly in the workplace, right? And so having your tribe and having your people. I said to my husband 6 weeks out, I think must have been after I'd fallen off the horse, didn't hurt myself, luckily, right? It was, my horse spooked at someone coming past. It was, people talk about a freak accident. Nothing's a freak accident. There's normally a set of steps, right? But I had a loose rein, and anyway, I was on the ground. But I said to my husband, I don't think I can do this ride. And he's like, you've got 42 days to figure it out. He's like, you're not going. And so even when I turned up to this ride on the day with my horse, I was still like, oh my God. And then on the first day of this, we get to the first bridge, which was, we had to we'd cross 50 bridges on this ride, concrete bridges, right? Which is, a different surface for a horse. So they're, going over a river or a creek or whatever. And the first one, she wouldn't go over. And then she wouldn't go over with someone on the ground trying to lead her. I'm on her back. I had to get off her and then lead her across. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a long ride, Yeah. But by the time I got to the end of that ride, after all that consistent, hours in the saddle, right? We rode over, if anyone knows listening, the Bonnie Doon Bridge, right, which I think is about 300 or 400 metres long. Got a great big road beside it, and, it's not something you do every day. And, doing it on a loose rein. So, but I think the original question was confidence, and how do you how do you build confidence as those consistent actions, and then next thing you know, you find yourself in the destination, right? And then you're looking for what the next piece is, right?
Yeah.
There was another lady that I interviewed on the show as well, and she talks about fear, and she talks about the voice inside your head, and that voice is there to keep you safe, where like and to protect you, and maybe you've had trauma in your childhood or something like that. That voice is there to help you, but in those situations, but you've got to figure out when you listen to that voice and when you don't listen to your voice. And so I've got a new thing. I just gave my horse a holiday, and I've just gotten back on her this last weekend, and I've got a new thing, which is remember your skills. So when you're coming up against those situations that are challenging, remember your skills and the skills that I've ridden this horse 122 kilometres over 50 bridges, over the Bonnie Doon Bridge, with sheep, deer, bikes, other people, trucks. I've ridden on the main street of Yea. Remember my skills. And then also the power of the tribe, right? So on that ride, in any kind of extreme situation, we would bunch up as a group. So we'd bunch the horses up, and the horses would support each other, and we'd bunch up as well, and we would support each other as well. And with my horse, I would lower my heels in the saddle a bit. I would just gently wiggle her mouth, and I would talk to her and be like, I'm here, I've got you back. And that's what you need to do with the people around you, right? So, yeah.
So that's interesting. So that kind of segues into the I was going to ask you about, which is the equine assisted learning initiative or program, where I believe you're working with people to kind of harness working with horses to kind of, develop that teamwork and leadership skills. Talk me through that. What's going on with that?
So horses will, you've got to be very present in the moment. Horses will give you feedback instantly based on like your energy. So if you're trying to walk into a horse's space and it doesn't know you and it doesn't feel comfortable, it's going to tell you very quickly that that's not okay. And so you can very much get feedback on yourself and how you are as a person in the presence of horses. And some leadership teams and some people need that feedback that maybe they're not getting otherwise, or they're not hearing, or or people in senior roles that are not getting like the feedback that they're an arsehole, right? Yeah. Speaking very plainly. Yeah. And then people think everyone's nice to your face, but behind your back everyone's talking about you. So horses will give you that.
There's no filter with a horse.
There's no. They're not. They don't think you're not going to pay them that much, right? So there's no kind of. Yeah, they will just tell you how it is. And so I've very much been exploring that work, and how do you bring that to people? And so that's kind of like a new type of piece that I'm kicking off. Yeah.
That's great.
And I think, you very much, it allows people to be mindful, it allows them to be present, it allows them to let stuff go and, be in the moment.
Yeah, awesome. You've also recently launched Tech Boosters.
Yeah.
This is quite hot off the press, so I haven't quite had my chance to wrap my head around this yet. What's Tech Boosters all about, and what are you excited about with it?
Yeah, so look, I've partnered with a colleague of mine, Rachel Collins. So what I've noticed in my career being a CIO is that you need cash, generally, to deliver technology. And I've just, through the roles that I've been in, I've been able to, find the wasted cash. So I've found millions of dollars of savings in every single role that I've been in. I've been recently working with a few customers and, came in to do some capability type uplift in their teams, ended up saying to them, shall I have a look at some of your contracts? A couple of $1 million later in savings and, turning off things, cleaning up. A lot of people will concentrate on maybe their 4 or 5 top vendors that they've got the majority of their spend with. They might have a long tail that doesn't get a lot of notice. So it's very much that whole space of contracts to actual invoices. So, I find discrepancies between what the contract amount is versus what you're getting charged. We'll find out of contract, so an opportunity to renegotiate stuff. We'll find also, bad offboarding, so you're still paying for mobile phones, you're still paying for licensing, you're still paying for all of those things. So very much focused in that type of activity to then fund innovation, to then fund growth, to then, so...
Because there's the CFOs love you, vendors hate you.
Probably.
Hate's too strong, but they're probably a bit nervous when they see you go in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, and I mean, so I've got the background of having done the role. I know where the stuff's hidden, so to speak. And so, the value that we've been able to get with our customers is extraordinary. So, and look, I think, so that's kind of the first start of the business, and I think we'll just, evolve it over time, right? Myself and Rach have got a excellent background in delivery and agile and all of those things, cyber, all of that. I'm very much these days, so if you're like, gosh, you're doing coaching, you're doing this, you're doing that, I'm at a point in my career where I want to have more of a portfolio career. I want to have the flexibility. I ride my horse about 5 days a week.
Yeah.
When I'm working a big job that's very early in the morning or late at night, I'd like to do that when the sun's out a bit more.
Great.
So,
And I think, again, you're kind of role modelling to people as well through what you're trying to create with leadership.
Yeah.
Where you can get to as well. Don't pigeonhole yourself into one thing or this. And you talk about growing confidence, where you're constantly pushing the boundaries and pushing the envelope for yourself in terms of what you want to become. Yeah,
there's nothing like challenging yourself at 50 odd to start a few businesses, right? So after a corporate career. So
it's interesting. I did read, and I can't remember the exact statistic, but you're something like 4 times more likely for a startup to be successful if you launch it when you're 50 than when you're 20.
Nice. Good. Happy days.
Mark Zuckerberg is like the one freak.
Oh, is he?
But apparently, that he is. That is a very, very unique case study. Most particularly tech startups are set up with people that have got some runs on the board and have lived and been through things.
And it's interesting, right? I had some advice when I started kind of lady leadership to, maybe have a business partner or do it with someone. And I didn't. I did it by myself. And so with this, I've decided that I wanted to work with someone.
That's nice.
Yeah, and, it's very good. So Rach and I have worked in a couple of organisations together, and, being able to just, chat to someone about, we're working, like you said, it's early days. The business has been around for probably 6 or 7 months, and we've launched out to the market more recently. But, just being able to talk to someone else about things, because my husband does get a bit tired of having to listen to everything all the time. So
it's a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
You think you and your husband have obviously been each other's kind of confidant and support over the years, so you're going to get similar advice.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's great and it's sound advice, but it's great to hear it from somewhere else or a different perspective. It's only going to evolve your thinking.
Yeah.
As well. So cool. We're going to go to our lightning round now. I'm going to put a bunch of these cards out. This is the whole pack. There's no duplicates, I promise. I always say to people, I'm not a croupier. I feel like I need to go to Crown and get a few lessons on how to lay out cards.
I've got tarot cards, so these.
Now that would have been an interesting. There you go.
Yeah, I didn't talk about reading the tarot, did I? No. So how many do you want?
Three's plenty. So flip it across, read the question, and give us your answer.
Early bird or night owl? Oh gosh, I'm just not either. Really? Oh, look, I like to. I'm more of a, is there a deadline? So I'm more likely to leave something until there's a bit of a deadline, and then I'll get it done very quickly. And that could be morning or that could be night. So what I would do in my career is I wouldn't leave the office until I was finished my work that I wanted to get done for that day. I never took work home, because I just knew I couldn't, once I got home, I couldn't really do it.
That's good boundaries.
Yeah. Or I'd get in early. And so I always knew if I got in early, I'd get it done. I'd just get it done in whatever the allocated time was.
So you kind of change your beat to the workload that's in front of you, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's good.
All right.
What do we got next?
Have you navigated career transitions? How have you navigated career transitions, and were there any risks you took that turned out to be particularly rewarding? Oh, look, I think. Like I said earlier, it's always been what's the next job and the job after that. There's certainly been stuff that I've wanted to do that I haven't got, right? And there's been things. I'm a big believer in what is meant for you will not pass you by, though. So it's just been a bit what's next. Should I have thought about things a bit more strategically sometimes? Yes, but then I'm not one to hang around somewhere if I'm done too. So yeah. I'm a bit more, I think I like the excitement and the kind of fast-paced and, you know, delivering stuff. And
get in, find out what needs to be done, get it done, look for the next problem.
Correct. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Or opportunity.
Problem solving. Yeah, I love problem solving. Give me, you know, it's a bit, myself and an old colleague, Belinda, we'd always laugh about, you know, because in IT we always have problems, right? So it's like, don't mind a bit of a disaster. Like, let's put on our backpacks and solve this. You know, like a lot of IT people won't admit to it, but you know, geez, we don't mind a problem. You know, give me an outage.
There you go, CrowdStrike, you're all over it.
Yeah. Luckily, I wasn't working anywhere that was affected by that. But it's like, you know, things have been going down my whole career, right? So I mean, my first job was on the help desk. You know, I had 18 months of solving problems.
That's right.
You know,
I remember I don't know if someone said this on the podcast or I heard it somewhere else, but said no one ever phones help desk and says thanks for doing a good job. Like you only ever hear when there's a problem, right? That's the nature of help desk.
I remember taking 100 calls, you know, in a day.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, there was one funny moment where I reset 3 of Target's stores, like the entirety of the store. I was supposed to set up a job that was supposed to run overnight, and in those days, if you didn't put in a date and time, it would just run automatically. Pressed enter, and we could just see the green screen, like this stuff just going offline. And it was right before Christmas too. It like took half a day to get it all back up. I think I went home. I think I was pretty upset.
I remember I had a friend that worked in help desk, and I'm never sure if this was a myth or whether it was true, but he said you always used to get the calls in help. This is old when you had the PC boxes rather than laptops and so forth. And the calls that would come in, someone saying, the coffee cup holder's broken in my computer, and it was the CD drive.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's like, no, that's not for coffee cups.
Yeah, I've had people follow cabling like around the wall to try and find a device. You know, you'd be like, oh, there's 3 green lights on the front, and it's, you know, they'd be in the comms room. I can't see it, you know. Yeah. Okay, can you see a yellow cable? You know, they're like, okay, well, follow. Yeah, so.
Amazing.
All right, if you could have one superpower, what would it be? So this is an interesting one, and this is what comes to mind, right? It's not really a superpower, but I'm actually blind in my left eye. So if I could have anything, I'd just have that eyesight back. So so I lost.
Always been
it's degenerated. It's hard to say that word. Over time. So when I was in that first job as the CIO at Simplot, I found out at the same time I was losing my eyesight in my left eye. Wow. I went, as a typical woman, I went to put mascara on the other eye, and so you kind of close one eye, and I realised I couldn't see the tip of my nose with my left eye. So So
you literally know what it was like before and after as well, as in you've kind of been through the
journey. Just over time. And so your brain, it's a very interesting thing about the brain will just kind of fill in the picture, but if I turn like that, I can't see you at all. And so, you know, I'm left-handed too, right? So, you know, so that, like, I'd just have that back, right? That would what I'd have back.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So not a superpower, but yeah.
Yeah, good answer. I like it. A couple of questions for you before we wrap up. What are you most proud of in your career?
Developing other people. Yeah. And creating good teams that support each other. I think, you know, I think at Target I actually kind of got there, right? So sometimes you'll create a team and it just might not be quite right. Someone will leave, someone will come. You know, it's quite hard to get that. And you know, there were certainly points at Target where, you know, I worked a little bit differently in that I would have a stand up with my direct reports every day for 15 minutes. And the best time I found to do that was actually after lunch, like 1:30. And what that did was allow people to have access to me, because often you're wanting a decision from the most senior person on something. So if they've got anything, here I am, right, 15 minutes. It also enabled us to work as a team and work through and get really great cut through on stuff that we wanted to deliver. So it's been really effective. I probably did that for the last 5 years of my career. You get to know people well too, right? You get to know your team members well, they get to know you well, and you create good relationships. So it's also, it is high pressured, right, as well, in that for other people, like turning up as well each day. But it wasn't a shopping list of what they'd done. So it's not an ego kind of driven meeting around, you know, I've delivered this or delivered that. It was very much a, what can I help you with, or who can I help, and we would just talk about what was done. So in terms of our plans or our goals, like what's Like, if our most important thing is to do this, what have we delivered to do that? So it was very much as a group. So it wasn't maybe in their own group. It was us as a group. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm interested in the feedback that people receive through their careers. So specifically, what's the most significant feedback you would say you received?
What's the most significant feedback? Gosh, this makes it sound like I haven't listened to any of it. I think the thing is probably it's like when you get into the senior roles, you actually don't get a lot of feedback. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. You don't get thanked a lot. You don't get a lot of development.
How about early in your career? Was there someone who took you to one side and said, "No, know this. You need to know this"?
Gosh, I just can't think of something. So I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's right.
I haven't listened to any feedback. No.
And I'm sure you have, but maybe you've absorbed it. Because it was interesting, throughout your career, what I've kind of heard as we've been having this conversation is numerous people have been impactful.
Yeah.
At different moments where from your granddad kind of saying,
yeah, absolutely.
Computing's the future.
My mum going,
I hope he bought shares because he'd be loaded now. To your mum, go and see if you can find a job in the office. Yeah. To the 4 people, the women that you named, that you kind of had those connections with, and clearly your husband's been a very influential part of your life as well. So to me, it sounds like you've selected and embraced and kind of and built those relationships with people. So it may not have felt like feedback. It's more consultative maybe than a hard moment.
Yeah. I think I've always... So I ask for feedback all the time. And so when you say significant, I can't think, but I will ask.
Yeah.
I will... So, and people who've worked with me will be smiling because we'll leave a meeting and I'll say, how do you think the meeting went?
Yeah.
But then I'll say, how do you think I went in that meeting? So I'm always continuously asking for feedback. So I'm always gauging feedback anyway. So
it's something we've been really working on within the Ember business actually around radical candor.
Yeah.
And giving feedback. And a tactic that we've been using, or certainly I've been using, is ask people to kind of rate an interaction or a meeting or whatever it is. Give me a score out of 10.
Yeah.
Because I find when you say to someone, give me some feedback, it can be quite confronting for that person.
That's right.
So and someone may say, 7 out of 10. Great. What would have made it an 8?
Yeah. Nice.
Just try and give me one thing or a couple of things to take away that could have made that experience that little bit better for you. And people feel way more comfortable at that point, because you've kind of deflected away from the individual to the situation.
Yeah, I like that.
So, it's a nice little tactic. It's my kind of thing I'm working on this year is that, I would say.
Yeah. But I think, the other thing with feedback, right? And so when you ask the question, I probably think of negative feedback, unfortunately. And that's the other learning too, is you don't have to take all feedback on, right? So, when the lady that I was talking about said, I was never going to be a project manager, well, I was like, I'm not going to take that on.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
That's probably inspired me. That like when I've been told I can't, it's actually inspired me to, do better.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and again, as we've been learning to kind of work with feedback in the business, I've had this sort of challenge that we've discussed with the group, which is what's opinion and what's feedback.
Yeah.
Because you've got to be very careful, because some people are very quick to offer an opinion.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you. And
if you're not careful, you end up with a multitude of opinions and views and, well, what do you deal with and how do you take that on? And I think
women get that a lot too. We get judged on, we're not. So there's another lady that I've interviewed, Annalie Blundell, and she's written a book called The Gender Parody, and she talks about women being ladylike and being leader-like. So you can be ladylike and you can be polite and all the rest of it, but you'll be judged for not being leader-like and not making tough decisions and being assertive and that type of thing. If you're too leader-like, then you get judged for not being ladylike enough, and that you're a bit too aggressive and you're a bit too driven, and you don't have a personality and all that kind of stuff. So
It's funny saying that. It reminds me very early in my management career. I had an absolute superstar lady that worked for me. I'm not going to name who it is, but she'll know if she listens to this. And I gave her some feedback, and I said, "Oh, you can come across quite cold."
Yeah.
And we worked together for probably another 15 years, and she never let me forget giving her that feedback in a friendly way. But she always said, and I always said, "I didn't mean it like that. It didn't really come across right in the moment." But it's what you're just describing there.
Yeah.
And I was trying to articulate. You've got this compassionate side, but I kind of see this.
Could you show it a bit more? Yeah. Potentially, right? But then you've got to ask yourself, would you judge a man the same, right? So, and if you would, then fine, right? But often we don't, and so we tend not to ask men to be too different to how they show up, but we ask women to show up differently all the time. And so, when I was at Woolworths, I was mentoring. They had a good mentoring program there, and I was mentoring a lady and named Lorraine, and she said that other people would say to her, what's Samantha McIntyre like, because apparently I would come across as quite cold or driven or assertive or whatever, because, I've got the toddlers at home and, I've got the busy job and all the rest of it. And she would be like, oh, she's great, because she got to know me at a different level, right? Which is not what you necessarily bring to every interaction, nor should you have to, right? So, and at the end of the day, like we're in workplaces, they're outcome driven. So you've just got to decide how you want to turn up, and
that's right.
Where that sits with what you're comfortable with, right?
I've always taken the view that consistency is the best approach.
Yeah. Yes, I agree completely.
Consistently in our soul, consistently in our soul. What are you reading, listening to at the moment? What's inspiring you?
Yeah, so I sort of went and saw Ryan Holiday the other week when he was in Melbourne, the Daily Stoic. Yeah. And so I've just about finished his book, The Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought he was, so my husband, it was actually, so I should say his name's James. And, he's been a big part of my life, right, as you mentioned. And the kids as well, right? But so he was into him, and so we went along and saw him, and then I really enjoyed his humility, and I enjoyed the way that he presented himself. I think it's really interesting to create a business off the back of, Marcus Aurelius and all of the learnings and the Stoics and all the rest of it. And you read it, and even so probably one of the things that I picked up for myself in that is being a bit less judgmental and being a bit more compassionate, which is interesting. And so that, like, reading that book and thinking through that, it's just made me think a bit more. So that's one learning that I've had, is about having compassion for other people's situations and maybe not being so judgmental. And then the second thing would be changing. I can be not looking at my phone in the morning, first thing in the morning. My husband and I have done a gratefulness practice for a couple of years. He got me into that as well, and what are 3 things that you're grateful for? And so we do that every morning. And it could be, last week because the sun's shining, it's going to be 20 degrees in Melbourne in the middle of winter. It could be the big things, the small things, that kind of stuff. I've just started a book called Horse as well, right, which is a great big thick book about the evolution of horses. So
interesting.
Yes.
No, generally, I reckon that because it'd be quite surprising to. I've got no idea of the history of horses, but I can imagine.
Yeah, so all about how they've supported, like, humans in war and all of that kind of stuff.
Like. Do you know what? I think I read a review of this book because it's about that, about the horses going to war and all these kind of things as well.
The same guy wrote a book called The Mosquito.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. On the Stoic stuff, by the way, just out of interest, there's a book called, I think it's called Being Stoic at Work.
Right.
And it's written by a lady from Melbourne, who works, I'm sure she works in people.
Do you know what? Culture. I think has she just launched that, or is she just?
It's only been about, I reckon, maybe 6 months ago.
Okay.
It's quite fun, right? Yeah. As in, she's got like the 50 rules of work with Stoicism or something like that.
Because I think she stood up at the event that I went to and mentioned it. So,
there you go. I did actually. I tagged her in a LinkedIn post because I read it and it made me laugh. And then I looked her up and saw that she was in Melbourne and worked in one of maybe the big law firms or insurance firms or something.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's really cool. There's someone from Melbourne too. But that's a really good, funny laugh out loud, because it is like pretty much a cartoon and then a kind of point that she really brings it to life.
You know, when The Office came out in the UK, I couldn't watch it. Because I worked in Milton Keynes at the time.
Oh, there you go.
I just thought,
and you probably had a boss like Ricky Gervais.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, this is my job. This is where I'm.
It's nice when you find something and you kind of associate back to life or kind of where you are. I reckon it's so awesome. Look, thank you so much. I think you said something earlier about your podcast, which is that you learn so much. And this is episode 30, and I kind of think, wow, this year I've managed to invest north of 30 hours in my own personal development by seeing some incredible people.
That's right. Yeah.
And there is always something to take away. And I know the production team here, we go away and we always talk about this stuff and what we heard and learned. And so it's never lost on us kind of being grateful. We talk about gratitude, grateful for people to come and give up their time, and especially yourself today. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Tales from Tech Titans, and be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcast. If you'd like to get more insights about tech careers, then check out the Ember, that's EMMBR LinkedIn page for the latest updates, articles, and engaging discussions.